So now I'm starting officially the content of this seminar. And thank you, I said you everyone to participate, to register to this. And for those who have been following the whole series of these seminars, we thank you very, very much for all your interest in these 4 webinars. We are arriving today to the last one. The webinars were also in the context on the war in Ukraine. And today we would like to focus on the topic on the learning experiences. What can we learn from examples of feminist peace initiatives in other situations and other contexts when there has been conflict and situation of war, and how women have mobilized themselves, and what can we learn from that? This is in the idea that we would like to include women also. We want to recall again the importance of women participating in peace, and also in the understanding that the women and other marginalized groups should be also part of the peace process and in decision making, and they should be part of the table of negotiations. And we should recognize the important role that they play promoting a culture of peace. And this is mainly the agenda of women, peace and security that is holding us today. We will reflect on women's rights defenders that have mobilized in peace processes and what lessons and strategies were learned from them. What we can learn from examples of feminist peace initiatives in Ukraine and former Yugoslavia and in Colombia. In the past events, in the past webinars, we have reflected also in reflections on how to promote peace and in Ukraine and beyond. We have talked about the other extreme forms of violent patriarchy and nationalism against which women as feminists are struggling a lot. And we have discussed in this series the strategies that are existing to promote peace building and what we can do to minimize the harm to women and girls, especially regarding conflict related to sexual violence, human trafficking, and any other form of gender-based violence that arise in this moment of conflict. And also on the lack of access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. That is something that comes also in these situations. So I'm going to welcome the panelists today. We have 3 really interesting and important people with a long experience. We have Sonja Lokar. She's a feminist in Slovenia and internationally, with a long list of organizations working in what she has been working and she has contributed to. She's a sociologist and a specialist in political party development. She has published more than 300 articles in different languages, and mainly in the topic also of women and peace. We welcome also Inga Luther, is Managing Director of Mobile Academy for Gender Democracy and Peace Promotion, Owen, and has facilitated for 6 years, 6-year-long program in Women Initiative for Peace in Donbass, WIPD, in Ukraine. And through this program, partners from Ukraine, Russia, and other countries have worked on different activities that what you will share today, if I'm not wrong, you say? Thank you. And from the other side of the continents, we have Ileana Maria Colonia Llanos. She's a feminist, pacifist, and anti-militarist. She has been active with la Ruta Pacífica de las Mujeres en el Valle del Cauca y la Unión de Ciudadanas de Colombia in the city of Cali. She has been, among others, promoting initiatives for the participation and leadership of women and young people in the process of peace building. Now that I'm here, I remember also we do have a translation. This is for everyone here. Could you just give me a shot? The translation is for everyone, and For those who are joining from the other part of the continent, you can join under channel. Do they have to sign a channel?
If you see the if you see the interpretation box, it's a globe. I will put it in Spanish as well. You can choose your language. We have Spanish and English, and you can mute also the original language. So choose your language. We will have part of our speakers speaking in Spanish.
Yeah, thank you. So this is for our speakers who are from Colombia. Ileana, she will be presenting in Spanish. So we have 4 main questions, and we will start for the first one. I will start perhaps mainly starting with the same order I presented them. So the first person was Sonja. And this is the question that we will work with all of you. I will give you 5 minutes for each of you, so we have enough time for everyone. So the first round of questions is to invite you to give us the background of the war, the conflict, or the process you have been involved. So just give us the context that you're going to present today. Thank you very much, Sonja.
Thank you very much for having me on this really important serial of webinars. And I'm really happy to be able to talk to you about the experience of peace processes or prevention of war, stopping of war, recovery after the war, that women of the Balkans were working on for a long, long time. First of all, I would like to say that the wars are not a momentum, a thing which happens in the moment. It is something it is prepared in a long period of time. For example, the war in Yugoslavia was practically in preparation for at least 6 to 7 years before first armed conflict started. And what is really impressive is that women were between the first one who understood that the political process which was going on in former Federation of Yugoslav nations is something which might lead to the war. And the women, not all the women, some, especially feminist, independent feminist groups, were the first one to announce the possibility that the war can erupt, and that we have to do everything to stop this solution of the problem of transition, because Yugoslavian Federation fell apart in the process of transition from one-party system to the pluri-party system, from economy which was mostly led by the state institutions to the economy which is based on market, on freedom of markets. So this is the first thing I think it's important to know. The second, when the war was in the making, women were the only ones, very few women, not all women, who all the time stood on the position of peace and negotiations and not war. We had a peace movement in Yugoslavia before the war, which was first led by men. But when the conflict erupted, the men stopped to be peacemakers, while the women stayed, some of them stayed. The third thing I would really like to underline is the fact that similarly, like we have the situation between Russia and Ukraine, these two countries were one country not so long ago. In case of Yugoslavia, this was the dissolution of federative country, and there were the elements of I would say, nations in the making, and at the same time, war which tried to prevent that these nations are made in the borders which were done before in the form of republics. So this was the war for a different division of the territory and based on national principles. it has some similarities with the situation between Russia and Ukraine now. What was really important for us, that these women who were peacemakers and who were trying to prevent the war, we worked across border lines of the states in the making. We worked across these border lines before the war erupted, we worked when the war already erupted, and we worked after the war ended by the truce and some peace agreements. So this international aspect of our cooperation, I think, is of crucial importance. And last but not least, I think that these peace women movements at the beginning, before the wars erupted, did not have any whatsoever recognition from internal actors, external actors. Foreign actors who should be supporters of this women's movement were practically not there. Whatever we tried to do, we did on our own force, on our own money, on our own initiative. And because of this total, I would say, ignorance from the international actors, our movement was defeated thoroughly when the war erupted. In Sarajevo, the first victims killed in front of the parliament were 3 students of medicine who were members of the Yugoslav New Women's Peace Movement. So this is the situation before the war erupted.
Thank you very much, Sonja, for this short but really concise information on the context in the Balkans and the former Yugoslavia. Thank you very much. Inga, thank you. I give you the floor.
Thank you very much for this invitation, and I'm really honored to be together with 2 women from the Balkans and from Colombia. Just a personal note that both conflicts, both wars has influenced my political education a lot and has been a great source of inspiration for my work that I'm doing now. So I'm very happy to have this conversation. I want to explain what we have been doing and what is the structure of our initiative and a little bit about the background. But before I do this, I want to mention that, of course, I'm part of a German organization, a German women's peace organization. So I'm really also talking as a German activist, you know, and today I'm coming from a conference in the foreign ministry where the topic was feminist foreign policy. And I just wanted to mention this briefly because this gives us a little bit of hope that we have more support from our own government. And it gives us more attention, but of course there are also a lot of challenges, what it really means and how to prevent that it becomes just a political high-level thing, and that it really has some strategic points to it. So that was more about the German context. Now, UWEN, the organization that I work for, has founded together with Russian and Ukrainian organizations an initiative that in 2016. I have to say that my organization has had relationships to the Eastern European region for much longer. So we had, and this is really an important aspect always to our work, that we have these long-term links and relations and exchange for many, many years. So, but when the war erupted in the Donbass and the Crimea was taken by Russia, there were some organizations in the south of Russia that we know very well and that we had this partnership before, but also women and organizations in Ukraine that said, you know, we have to do something and we have to stay together and talk about what is happening. And we don't want to accept this division amongst us. And so this initiative was founded, and since then, we have regularly come together in meetings where we really talk and try to seek and pursue also concretely paths to peace in the region. We have carried out regular dialogue meetings with until now more than 70 women. So in the meetings we were about 45 women that came together, but we also have implemented practical initiatives for building peace in the regions. So our colleagues are really initiating also cross-border initiatives, have initiated working groups on specific topics. And so we are really working on different levels, on the grassroots level, but also trying to communicate this to the higher political level or to some decision-making levels. And our aim is really always to empower women on all sides to the conflict to really find ways how to become active, to create conditions for peace and security in Ukraine and the neighboring states. And maybe what is really important about the context in that we are working is that we are working with women, not only from the different territories. So we are working with women from Ukraine, we are working with women from the territories in Donetsk and Luhansk, and we are working with women from Russia, and also we included several women from Western European countries. So they are living really in very different contexts to the war, but also we have from these regions different women that are in different conditions. So we have women that have fled, that have been IDPs, internally displaced people, but also refugees. We have people that are working in think tanks, for example. We have journalists, we have influential women because they have their own NGOs, but we also work together with women that have maybe a small store in the neighborhood where they are selling things, but they are really a center for the community. And in this aspect, they have a lot of influence and contact to the people. So we always looked for people that have a certain influence in their society on different levels, not only in the different regions, but also in a vertical sense. So this has really been a very interesting process also for the women themselves to get to know each other and to also get to know people that are in different areas of their own society. And as you can imagine, of course, since February 22, working together with these regional differences, the women that have participating in the platform are now under very different conditions. Some have moved now, some have moved to the Western countries, some have moved to Russia, and but a large part of the women that we are working with remains in the region under the condition of war. And this is also very important to mention that, I mean, you all read the news and what is happening to Ukraine and the severe security threats to the women, but also on the other side of the war, in the Donetsk, Luhansk regions, people remain there and they are still there and they are quite active. And also the women that stayed in Russia, I mean, some of our colleagues, especially from Russia, have now left the country, but there's also a large part of the participating women that are still in Russia and that are in these conditions that they are not only threatened by the repression, but also by their own society, because there's, as you know, large parts of society supporting the war. So this is really a tension and a very tense situation for women in Russia. And of course, I have said that we have also participants from Germany, Switzerland, and other parts of Middle and Western Europe, where we also feel the consequences of war in terms of new polarizations, heavy debates and discussions, and new policies that we see. And this always has been a focus of our dialogue meetings and of our activities, that we always try to analyze context, the specific context in the specific regions, and to really differentiate the different conditions under which the women are right now. And
Thank you. Yeah.
sorry, it's really
okay.
hard to put this one last thing I want to mention in terms of context, because this is really important for the further discussion on the political conditions. Before February 22, we had negotiations, we had the Minsk process, and this for us, it was an important political framework that we could work in. And now after February 22, we lack this political framework. There are no substantial negotiations right now. So we also have to create our own base for the common work, but we also lack this political frame or any kind of process that could lead to a peace. And this is really a new situation in this context.
Thank you. This is very important.
Taking time.
Thank you very much. No, it's important. It's important that we already all get the context as it is. Thank you. It's super interesting the taking here the importance of intersectional approaches also that are international, also cross-border approaches, including grassroots, including people, including all kind of different knowledges, understanding that all of them brings also something to the table of and the conversations of peace. It's important also what you just say, when you have no political support, then we need this framework, and this is something that we should also have into account. What kind of political approach, a political framework do we have now for discussion? Thank you very much. We're going to the third panelist. Ileana, muchas gracias.
La ruta pacífica de mujeres.
Mujeres aportan a la sociedad.
Para el reconocimiento de la dignidad de las mujeres.
Porque solamente en esta oportunidad con la ruta pacífica podemos darnos cuenta de que hay una Colombia que es víctima del silencio.
Sin la voz de las mujeres, la verdad no está completa. Sin la voz de las mujeres, la verdad no está completa. Sin la voz de las mujeres, la verdad no está completa.
Thank you, Ileana. I think this was a very nice introduction.
Muchas gracias a ustedes por la invitación. Buenos días desde Colombia, desde Cali, en el Pacífico colombiano. Es un honor.
I'm talking to you from Cali, from the Colombian Pacific. It's an honor to be here with my fellow panelists, and it's a great opportunity to express myself as an activist from the civil society and to talk to you about how we live the peace process in Colombia. Colombia, since its birth in the 19th century as a republic, has been determined by social and political determinants that are influenced by politics. The topics we're going to talk about today have been here for the last 60 years. the origin of this internal 60-year conflict has its origin in the sharing of the land. The deep inequalities that exist in Colombia, and this turned into violence, and then drug trafficking, political actors that turned the conflict. Also back in the 90s, neoliberalism with its two pillars, patriarchy and capitalism. These armed groups always reasoned that this was the only method to transform society. In the face of this plurality of actors that completely transformed the conflict, most of the actors belong to the traditional political groups, also the guerrilla groups, and at the same time, other revolutionary groups came to life, and then the paramilitary, the terrible paramilitary. Colombia always had a huge social gap, a very powerful local elite, because we are a country of regions. This social gap exacerbates on the indigenous people, on Afro-descendants, peasants, women and girls. These groups didn't have the same access to the rights of ownership or to state services. This absence of the state is obvious not only in rural areas that have suffered the armed conflict, but also human rights. The presence of the state in certain areas of the country is basically non-existent. In the midst of all of this conflict that was quite intense since the 90s up until 2010, combats, paramilitary, terrorist attacks against civilians, etc., etc. But as a result of all this conflict, well, a huge figure of victims, over 8 million victims, 49% of those are women. Over 8,800,000 victims. And around 30,000 who died during the armed conflict, but it's more closely to 1 million people. This is not an accurate record. I would like to highlight that 80% of the people who died during the armed conflict were civilians, and only 20% of them were actual combatants. Among the victimizing acts that have had an impact on us is that over 4 million of them had to flee their own lands with their children, with the other women of their families that survived the attacks of the armed groups. Over 500,000 of them suffer feminicides. 200,000 were under threat. This threat is still ongoing for women who live on the territories, especially if they are social leaders in their areas. Over 80,000 of them were victims of forced disparitions. Many of them also lost their lands. They're victims of terrorist attacks, of combats, of harassing. But there is an even more impactful piece of data, which is on record. Over 32,000 people are on Colombian records as victims of sexual violence. 91% of them are women. These human rights violations that the international rule of law has consequences at different levels. Women suffer fear, depression, shame. They suffer STDs. They suffer lack of communication with their families. They have a difficult relationship with their children that were born out of this sexual violence. what happens after 2012? The government began the conversations with the terrorist group that had the biggest impact in Colombia since 1964, which are the Armed Revolutionary Forces of Colombia, which are known as the FARC, and this negotiation process began that lasted until 2016, where in Theater Cologne, they signed the final agreement of ceasefire. And from then on, the implementation of these agreements that generated advances to close this inequality gap in Colombia. We're still on this path. We have great expectations with this new government that is advocating for equality and peace. And we have a president, a vice president who is Afro-descendant, a woman that has been elected. Is very important for us. This gives us visibility for our grassroots activism from the territories that receive a direct impact of the conflict. These women are the ones who suffer conflict on their bodies, on their lives, on their territories. We hope that this vice president will allow the participation of men leaders, but also especially women leaders. 930 of them were killed. For us, these figures are important because these are the actions for prevention, to keep doing actions for the prevention of
anything in the chat, so I assume that it is working well. Thank you very much for this interesting also context, which is completely different region, different culture, but we find the commonalities on violence against women, the patriarchal system also coming in imposing in such long-term conflict like in Colombia, how people learn also to make other kind of propositions of peace while you have been living your whole life in a conflict atmosphere, in the culture of conflict and war all the time. So this is something that is what we also want to bring, how, and it's related to the next question. In such contexts, which are conflict, war, distress, how women are still able to have agency to themselves, create the resistance and come with propositions. So, and here's the next question. In this different context, what was the role of women's movement during these conflicts and along the peace process that took place or was taking place? So what was the role that women played that we can share also in the current situation, that it can inspire all the women's movement, what we can do, which is the question that we are doing now, what we are posing, what we are making ourselves this question, what we can do as women movement. Inga, no, Sonja, you started first. Thank you. It's the floor for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was really interesting to listen to both of you. And I was just thinking how similar things are going on when you really try to interfere into the process, which is much stronger than your movement, which is going on regardless what you think, how well you are organized, what you want to do. It just goes like an avalanche. And it is so difficult in this situation of avalanche to try to find points how you can redirect the whole process in a different direction, from violence to truth at the beginning, from truth to the peace negotiations, from peace negotiations to reconciliation and normalization of life. And I'm thinking about the second phase of the process in the dissolution of Yugoslavia. This was the war. the real war. It lasted nearly 5 years altogether, and it is not ended. We don't have now armed conflicts in the Balkans, but we still feel like we are sitting on the keg of powder. And every moment, nationalistic forces can push again the whole situation into the full-fledged war. But what women did, women peacemakers, what did they do in times of war? They transformed their organizations, mostly in the organizations of support for the victims of the war, especially those who were victims of war violence, also sexual violence. And at that moment, their role was really incredibly big, because they established real institutions where victims could look for support and relief. And at the same time, they became a part of the preparations for the Beijing conference, lobbying and advocating that the rape in war should become qualified in the international law as the crime against humanity, or war crime even. And in fact, in the Balkans, like similarly as we heard in Colombia, and now I think it's not much different in Ukraine, rape and sexual violence against civilian women mostly is used as a weapon of mass destruction of morals of the people, of their ability to feel safe in their most intimate part of their beings. And this is what happened in the Balkans. But there was another side to the process of peacemaking and women's work in this process. It was their attempt to become a part of the political framework, international political framework, which was formed little by little as the war started to end. First, it was Dayton Peace Agreement. In Dayton Peace Agreement, there was not one woman from the Balkans who took part in these peace negotiations. In Kosovo Peace Agreement, it was very similar. So we had the situation where the voices of women were not heard in the peace, in the process of finishing the war. But the second part, when the reconciliation started, when the normalization started, then those peace women transformed themselves into the advocates for empowerment of women. And I think this is the biggest legacy of the women's peace movement in the Balkans, that they were capable in the moment when the Stability Pact for the Southern Eastern Europe was formed to knock on the door of international actors and to tell them, it is enough. We do not want to be treated anymore as victims, as objects, as those who should be saved by who knows whom. We want our seat at the political table, equal seat at the political table, and we want a different society, a society which is not based on machism, on exploitation towards women, on violence between men and women. We want a society which will be different. And this is, I think, what was really the biggest achievement of the Balkan women. And it came out of these small little peace groups which were alive before the war started, which worked together all time of the war, and then were capable enough to bring everybody, every progressive women together in order to make them an equal part of the political process. And it is amazing what were the results in the sense that the whole legal framework for gender equality in these countries changed, that the violence against women, not only in war, also in peace, became a political issue which was brought to the mainstream political table. So from the point of view of legislation, things are in many countries of the Balkans, now better than in many countries of developed West. But at the same time, in practice, the steps towards a different society are minimal, unfortunately. We are still in the process of having a nice legal framework and having a very awkward, bad, backward practice in place.
Thank you, Sonja, for this. I send it to. Thank you, Sonja, for this very much. Sorry, Inga, for the message. So thank you very much for this. Actually, yes, I think it's important, relevant to take out from here the importance of women claiming their own agency and self capacity to act and to take and speak out about their own interests also. Thank you.
You know, I didn't tell you, but when we asked for the gender task force within the Stability Pact, you know what they told to us? Who do you represent? You are not elected, you don't have a constituency to be responsible to. And we really had to be very persistent to prove that we are able to represent the interest of the majority of the women. And it was maybe also a lucky moment, because this was before, when we established the Stability Pact Gender Task Force, we in fact were before the 1325. Whatever we wanted was later on, a year later, written within the 1325. So we got a sort of international support for what we asked for. And this was a lucky moment. I think that in this moment, we are not in the same situation. We have a backlash on feminism. We have a backlash on human rights, and especially women human rights. And again, in all the fights which are going on, the voices of traditionalism, of pushing women back to their traditional roles of mothers of the nation and queens of the home, this is predominant ideology of all sides in conflict.
Thank you.
We have to change this. If we don't change this, we will repeat all the mistakes that were done in the Balkan War.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonja. Thank you very much. The floor is for you. Thank you.
I really can relate to a lot of things that you are saying, Sonja. But first I want to say I'm a bit careful of talking about a women's movement, I think, and less about the women's peace movement. I think we are far away from that. And if it exists, it's really small right now. So, but even though I think really we can do something, and I can relate to what you are saying, and I said that before also, that we really have to work before, during and after the war. And we are doing things right now, but we have done this for a long, long time. And these relations that we have from before are carrying us now through the war. And the readiness to keep in contact and to keep these relations is because we have established so much work before, and not only the dialogue work, I would say also the experience of the women to really be important with their issues and to really be able to do something about it in a very concrete and small, even if it's small, you know, and it became bigger over the years, what we could do together. And this experience is really important. So my first point is that it's really about self-empowerment. And this goes through the meetings. In the meetings, talking to each other, we develop an understanding of who we want to be, what role we want to play, what is our scope of action that we have, you know, even if we cannot change the higher geostrategic politics, but we can really evaluate together what is our scope of action. And this we have been doing for a long time, and we are doing this right now. We cannot stop the war right now, but we can still find out what we can do. And I heard this also from the workshops and from women and colleagues, that this is one of the most important points for many women, that they don't feel this this powerlessness. They want to feel like a subject, you know, like a person that has really something to say and something to do. And I think also for the personal survival, it's really important to feel that this war is not overwhelming me as a victim, but really that I have the possibility to do something. And women are actually doing a lot of things. And envisioning the future, I would say it's also very, very important to already now think what kind of vision, what kind of future we are imagining. And this is the most difficult part, I would say, because when you talk about this concretely, of course, people have very different ideas of how to envision this future and of how to get there. And as I said, you know, we are not a circle of women that are strictly against military or military actions. So we, you know, we are discussing this severely. But still, I think what unites us is really this existential need for peace, and we have to find a way how to get there in the future. And also what we can do, and you said this, Sonja, also, that to prepare, you know, to be able to have a political agency, you have to prepare yourself, and you have to work through all these issues, and also to have this this perception, I can change something and I have something to say. And we are trying to do this, and it's very important to have this prepared women from all sides to the war to be prepared for a negotiation process.
Thank you very much, Inga. Liliana, te doy el espacio para que...
Ever since the 90s, because of the 91 political constitution, Colombian women, we started to acknowledge ourselves, to realize how we could meet, begin initiatives and new types of activism that were visible before, and that we were capable to do things, that we were strong. We started creating networks. This had to do with pacific resistance to demand the rights and to fight the different types of violence against women. But we soon realized how important was to do political advocacy for peace in Colombia. So we started to identify ourselves, to find ourselves, to meet in many places. The Ruta Pacífica was born in 1996 as a call for action to create this resistance network of women that came from the territories that were direct victims of the armed conflict. This is because of a small village in a very faraway region of Colombia. All of the women have suffered violence from all of the different political actors, the guerrilla, the political actors, the military, everyone. So we decided to do this march from everywhere in Colombia to meet with these women in their territories and to say, we are here from all over Colombia. We're here to build a network to begin this resistance against war. We were able to resist war. Let's build peace. So this network became stronger and stronger over time. And the presentation video that introductory video that you saw through symbolic movements, the resistance, the marches, the plantones, as we call them, the ancestral rituals from women of all over their territories. They keep this resistance and this agenda for the construction of peace in Colombia. As I said before, we are a country of regions with very clear differences, cultural, political, and regional. This has been a huge challenge for all of us, that this meeting of over thousands of women all over the territories. This is our agenda that has transformed, but we are here. Let's meet here today. And let's tell this area where we are meeting in Colombia. Here we are 5,000 or 7,000 women who are here building peace from each and every one of our territories. I share what Inga said. I think it was her who said it. We cannot say that we're building peace. And I share this perception that this daily symbolism that we have when we meet, each one of our meetings, it makes us feel that we are building this, at least in this area of the world, at least in this region of our country. What is that we as women we can do? I would like to mention something. In Colombia, 11 peace processes were begun since 1982 up until 2016, but only 4% of the participants were women. And then with the negotiations for the peace process with the FARC in Havana, we were able to include women and gender perspective. There was a new subcommittee for gender, and this happened because of the advocacy from the social movement of women. So there are always gender-based proposals for the implementation of peace, the empowering, and the accountability for the rights of women in Colombia. For us, this is part of our common agenda as well, of this political movement of women that is constantly changing, moving in every region in Colombia. It's very important to be aware of the knowledge that women have in the territories, in their acknowledgement of the peace actions. These actions are unique. It's not the same peace action in the Caribbean Colombian, in the Pacific Colombia, in the Colombian Amazonic region. Women manifestations are different, and it makes that our movement, it never ends, it just transforms. Thank you, Ileana.
Social movements, social actors, and they deserve a place. As you were saying, Sonja, that they were asking you, who are you, who you represent, in the moment that there is a recognition that these actors are also part of the process of taking decisions, it's where we can have agency and actually say we are representing the women movements. And therefore it's important we keep on thinking on how we work in solidarity, I think. We're going to go to the next round, and because we are taking a lot of time in the conversations, I'm going to put the two next questions into one because they're too similar also, so we will not repeat ourselves. We're going to ask about what we can learn from the examples of feminist peace initiatives, from your own experiences in this feminist initiative, peace initiative, and what is the most important aspect to be taken into account to facilitate women's participation in peace. I think we already mentioned some of them, but it's important. I would like here to give like concrete examples that can actually give inspiration to all those women who are saying, what can we do now? Concrete examples of what have you done? What was the the resistance that you were mobilizing, you were into, and to give inspiration, to think, to bring others' ideas, what we can do. So this is my third and last question to you. Thank you, Sonja.
I think Inge was right when she said we don't have real women's movement. We have to create it. This is, I think, the most difficult challenge in every situation of a war, and even in war it's 10 times more difficult. But when you have a peace process, even then it is very, very difficult how to build the movement. And what we discovered in the Balkans, that we can build the movement if we organize what I call issue coalitions. It means that we focus on important issue to all women, and then we build cooperation between all women of different political backgrounds, different walks of political life where they work. For example, when we built a movement for legalization of quotas in all our countries, this is the way how we work. And practically how we did that, we organized thousands of small scale, 25 women in one seminar, but thousands of them in all the region, and discussed with women why women should be present in politics, why we should ask for at least 30% of presence in all decision-making bodies. This was the beginning. And from these small seminars, which were very simple, talking to women that if we want to change, if we want to prevent that the war happens again, then we have to have women in political decision-making, and not and the women who want to change things in a different way, not with war, but with political process, with democratic process, with accepting the differences, all what is known as broad European concept of democracy. This is how we brought women together. And what was the result? That when we formed this, I would say, bottom-up coalitions, then we started to build something which we called a sandwich strategy. It means that we always try to get support from international actors, to accept our pressure from bottom up, and to discuss with the party leaders and whoever was in power, to also include women voices. Why is it a sandwich strategy? Because when you have this bottom-up pressure and this top-down pressure, then you can squeeze your macho leaders in between these two pressures, and then they have to move in the direction you want. In our case, it was rather simple, because all the leaders of the post-war in the Balkans wanted to lead their countries to the European Union. So the European Union has this general statement of equality of men and women as a value and the goal of the European Union. So this was possible to build this pressure from the top down and to join this pressure from the bottom up, and then to squeeze the party leaderships in between. And in 10 years, we brought from 7% of women in the parliaments to more than 30% in average in the region. So this was really a huge change in the sense of presence of women in politics. But this presence still does not transform into the power of women, in the decision-making power for the things which are of crucial importance to women. And the crucial importance of women, for example, is justice. You cannot have peace without justice. We are still in the process of looking for the lost people, missing people in different countries in the Balkans. We still have cases when women who were raped meet in the streets of their cities those who raped them, and they are not punished. They are laughing to them in their faces after whatever happened, especially in Bosnia, where the carnage was the worst. So it's so many things still to do, but if we cannot keep the movement together, then we cannot create this pressure. And we cannot force political, still male-dominated actors to change their attitudes and to do transformative politics. For transformative politics, we really need strong women's movement, and we are not there. We don't have it now. We had it in the times of the Stability Pact, but now it doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately.
Thank you for this, and thank you for sharing this specific strategic sandwich strategy. It's important that we recall ourselves what kind of strategies are using, what kind of strategies are working in some of the other countries, how we can use some things contextualized in different times, in the new times also, and the kind of training a lot of women, creating awareness in a mass of women. That is also something really absolutely relevant in these times. It's something that is also comes, perhaps we will see it later. Thank you very much, Inga.
Again, I agree to a lot of things, but maybe I can answer to the question from another angle. I want to say that we are creating examples already, you know, and the mere fact that we are meeting each other is an example that peace is possible, I would say. Maybe it sounds a bit big, but it is already a kind of resistance to say I will talk with the enemy, you know, to women from the other side. And I'm asked a lot of times right now, how are you, and how can you continue? What are you doing now? People assume that we finish with our initiative right now, and I think only this is already something that we can show as a model that of course this is possible and we can stay together, and that you know, violence is not the only option. And the second point is that I think it's important to say that peace is not created only at the negotiation table, but we have these practices, and we have to work in our different societies, and maybe right now we need different strategies for each society. In Ukraine, it's more important, you know, to take care of the victims, but also to keep the society together and to keep it working. And in Russia and in the other territories of Ukraine, it might be more important to get people out of this tunnel, and also to care, of course, they're also the victims, but also to work with their society. And this is very difficult also because, of course, when you are a peace worker, you are constantly confronted also with resistance from your own society, calling you a traitor and all these things, you know. So I think this is a challenge, but this is also creating an example. For example, women are right now initiating small dialogue circles within their own societies. And this is also a kind of resistance to the dynamics that are going on right now. So I'm trying to be brief because I'm interested also to know what the questions are from the audience.
Thank you very much. Iliana, gracias. Te doy la palabra.
Bueno, pues, ¿qué hemos aprendido con esa?
What have we learned through this feminist initiatives for peace? Not only as the victims of the conflict, but as actresses in this process. They have taken upon these responsibilities, not only women in academia, not only the women who live in cities, but also the women who live in rural areas through feminist initiatives for peace, something that we've tried to do over time. And those who can accompany them, we do so. And we want to achieve this reconciliation of territories to recover a new way to cohabit. What do we consider important now in Colombia? We want to have this acknowledgement of the engagement, of the commitment that these women have with a real peace process in the territories. If there's no real peace in their territories, they or us, we don't feel that there's real safety, that there's a future for next generations. We need to acknowledge what women do for the economy of care. This is unpaid work, but it's clearly something that is provided for the economies of the country, of the different countries. We talk about this acknowledgement, this redistribution, and reduce this work at home that is provided mainly by women, but 90% of this care is provided by women. So these are spaces to do advocacy for these new spaces for a reason. We live this very interestingly. This is one of the initiatives that we have for this new phase with this new government that we hope promotes the implementation of the agreement and the construction of peace in our different territories to visibilize this input of women for the economy of the country, for peace, for resistance, to make clear that they're not just the women, the daughters, or the wives of the men of the country. They're much more than that. We want for all of us to realize this huge input, especially in the Colombian case of the women has done. We carry the load of war, and we're still accompanying them, but we carry on our shoulders the responsibility of the building of peace and the participation of women's movement all around the country. Thank you so much, Ileana.
So perhaps I'm the only one. Okay, so we're having already questions, and I want also to give a kind of really important and what is coming out, how we visibilize women, how we link and we knock the doors internationally, and how we can create these frameworks. That they are a lot of frameworks. The 1325 resolution is a big framework most of the countries have signed, but it's the implementation and how we make it actually to become something that is fruitful, that we can actually do something with the resolution. How we can resist and how challenging is in such polarization of cultures when we are now living in this so polarized cultures, black and white, and against or not against. So these are the questions, how we can mobilize, how we can give example, how we can inspire each other to continue in this thinking. We have the first question from Emily Brown. She's saying, I would love to hear what our speakers see as most helpful possible in changing the deep norms and narratives about women feminist leaders, when quotas and numbers alone take us only so far. With huge thanks to your incredible experience and insights. What do? We do a lot of, I will say, instrumentalization of all the tools, practices, policies. We, as social movements, women movements, we talked about peace. We created the resolution 3025, and then it gets completely instrumentalized by other actors who want to make it also their own issue. And so how we can also change that, how we can also change the norms, the narratives. What kind of experiences can you share with us for that?
I suggest we start from the other side.
You mean
not
Colombia?
right that I always have the first word.
Ileana, do you want to start with this one? Perhaps there are quite like concrete examples, I think, from Colombia. We have concrete examples of changing narratives. I think that has been something really powerful in the movement of the Ruta Pacifica.
That's the work we do to change the narrative. When we got together, we were working, we tried to have this feminist approach. We're trying to change this role of the leaderess who has followers. We need to have our approach as a pacifist, as a feminist movement. We want the women in the territories that they can get to talk with different actors in the public spaces, so they can talk with those who are in positions of power, so that they can do political advocacy collaboratively. We try not to have these very obvious leadership positions, but it's the strength of women that we accompany, and this is what allows for change, at least for us. That has been our experience. Another part of the question is how we go beyond quotas and figures when we talk about feminist leaders, how we change that. We don't just want quotas that are imposed on all of the gender policies, but we want those quotas to be really active, to imply real change. I don't know if you have any examples.
In the meantime, it's Sonja of Inga. Sonja, you would like to talk?
Yes, if Inga is not, I will give you a very interesting example. The first result of the coalitions that we built in Bosnia and Herzegovina in order to get more women into power, and then we got all of the sudden from 2%, 27% of women in the parliament. And then the first result of this change came when the parliament had to decide how they will let people who lived in public apartments to buy these public apartments. And the proposal of the government in this moment was that the men get the right to buy out these public apartments. In fact, not only men, but also spouses when they were married. But the women who were in big numbers, the widows, they didn't have the same incentives to be able to buy the apartments. So the women came all together, the women in the parliament from different political parties, and in fact stopped the discussion about this law till the law was not written in a way that the women who were widows had the same rights as the women who lived in couples, got the same incentives to be able to buy the apartments. Here you have a really clear example how from being present in the parliament, women have to move to really make changes in everyday life of the women. We have invested a lot of energy in so-called identity issues, which they are important. I don't say they are not important, but equally important are the issues of childcare, of daycare, of elderly care, of job conditions, work conditions, of differences in wages on gender basis, on pensions, pension gap, all these issues. When women who are in the parliaments are dealing with these issues in feminist way, I'm sure that everybody would understand why we needed so much many women in the parliament. We are not there. When I look at our parliament, for example, in the times of crisis, economic crisis, our parliament for the first time had 34%, I think, of women MPs. But the law which was accepted in order to deal with the financial crisis, it was really a draconian austerity law, hit women 3 times as much as did men. And these women who were there didn't do anything to prevent that. I think this is our failure. We have to change this.
Thank you. Inga, do you want to share something?
I have 2 thoughts on this point. The first is a bit similar. I think to go beyond quotas and figures is really to change power relations and at all level, at the local level, but also at the international level. And this means really to put forward the agenda, to define what is the concrete problems, and to bring this to the political agenda. And as I said before, this can be a really empowering experience. For example, we had in the past, we had the issue of checkpoints and border crossings, and the issue of documents that are necessary to the people in all territories of Ukraine, and that we could bring these issues to the fore together with other civil society organizations, and there was a kind of change achieved. So this is really changing something concretely, brings change in power relations and also the experience for the women. And the other thought I have on this is that these, what you say, the deep norms and narratives about feminism and women are very entangled with the war discourse. Yeah, you can see that the war is legitimized in an anti-feminist narrative, and on the other side, we see that people say we are defending here our values, our feminist values. So I think it's very tricky, this combination with the violence, but it's also important really to sit down and talk about the reasons why people follow these narratives. What are the reasons for people to believe in it? Because we see not only the political strategy of anti-feminism, but we see also people following these narratives. So we have to really analyze what is so attractive. Why is it so attractive to people to support this anti-feminism and to support this strategy of violence? So this is a big task that we have.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm inviting other participants to write more questions. Any other that you want to, or you want to share something, please feel free to write. Other points, other questions. And if the question that was shared, if it's already responded, if it's not, please, you can ask again to concretize something. And in this, I think it's important, these different practices that we are talking about on the narratives and like small steps also to bring people together, something concrete examples that touch the quotidianity, houses, the passport checkpoints, I think those are steps where we can also start with. We have another question that says, how do you reconcile peace struggles and feminist resistance against invasion occupations as in Ukraine? I will put it in the general chat.
I guess it's a question to me, but the others can also have an opinion on that. I think we don't reconcile this at the moment. I like the way you put the question, because this is really in the heart of the dilemma that we are in right now, and we are having heavy discussions on it. And for me personally, it cannot be reconciled, this dilemma, because we have this need for resistance against occupation. We have this need for security, physical security that has to be ensured, and that has, you know, that people have to be defended. And we have this idea, and I personally still have this idea, that more weapons bring more violence, and we will have a long-term war. And I really, in my heart, I feel that this has to stop immediately. But you know, if you don't have the immediate solution to stop it, you will be in this dilemma. And I think it's not resolvable right now. But on the long term, I think we really need to work on strategies how to stop this without having so how do you call it, Siegfrieden, without having a victory on the one side and a devastating destruction on the other side. So it's a very complex issue, I would say.
Thank you. Sonja, do you want to add something?
In fact, I agree with Inga. I don't think that you can reconcile things like this. But what we always can think about, when you have women who are now also combatants and they are included in peace, in war activities, etc., I think it is important to keep in mind that women should not be there, how to say this, they should not accept to be objects of male decisions. They have to be equals in every sense of the word. When I will give you the example. When the war in Bosnia ended, the women who had high positions in military were kicked out without any question asked. And they were put in a very precarious life situations. To many it didn't happen. So this is one very blatant example how after the war, even in the war, women were treated differently if they were in the army, and after the war it was even worse. So this is one example. I think that we should absolutely think about how to include in everything we do equality of men and women. In the army, in the police, in the ways how we organize the shelters, etc., etc. It's not a very deep thought, but it's a very practical one.
Thank you. Ileana, I wanted to ask you this onto these questions, how on the struggles with feminists and resistance again, how can we reconcile and peace more into this part? In Colombia, we're having now the whole process of La Comisión de la Verdad, which is taking outside finally what happened of a kind of conflict, what that was kind of people were closing their eyes to during years to the situation. Do you think this is bringing some kind of reconciliation? Do you think this is something that is an example?
If you refer to legacy of the report on the Commission of Truth, it has generated what they expected. For those who didn't live the conflict directly, they don't believe that what is told in the report is true. These are testimonials of women, of children, of LGBTQ communities, of Afro-descendants that were directly impacted by the armed conflict. Yes, what are aspirations, our movement, we have received this legacy. We're responsible to bring this legacy to all of the territories that we can reach. Private entities, public entities, schools, the church, the ecumenic church is very active in all this. And we have received this legacy with this mission to bring these testimonials, the conclusions of the report, and the recommendations, especially, so that we can build durable peace. We have taken this commitment. It's an honor for us as a movement and as part of the civil society that receives this legacy as allied network in the territories, that we can keep this legacy alive, so that we can keep the sustainability of the recommendations that are on the report for at least 10 years, I would say. And the most important aspect is the narrative of women who are survivors of the conflict, not only the impact on their bodies and their lives and their territories, but also how they lost their bonds, their relations with their families, with their past, with their culture. These recommendations are for us almost an agenda, a commitment with Colombian women, with Colombian peace, with the building of a durable and stable peace for future generations. Not only to be part of the peace, but to create this construction of peace. The report of this Comisión de la Verdad, this Commission for Truth, we're able to do this reading and to listen to this report from different areas of the communities, in the cities, in schools. They have promoted the reading of this report. It has several chapters, and the one we work more with is the chapter on gender. But we also talk about other chapters. The territorial ones are also very impactful. And also the sentence, what happened, why happened, and what are we going to do with what happened? How did we allow this to happen? How didn't we know that this was going on? So under those premises, we're trying to bring this legacy of the Commission, preferably to places where there are young women, teenagers, but also in many circles where there is resistance to the conclusions of the report and to its recommendations. We are not trying to impose ourselves. We're trying to create a dialogue, an opportunity to meet with others. This is what has created this fracture in Colombian society.
It's a long process. It's before organizing ourselves before. It's organizing ourselves during the time. It's organizing ourselves after the time. I see one of the questions of the role of the diaspora and migration women, migrant women who are building a peace also in other countries. How do you see this from your perspectives? We are also rounding up, going to the end, but we would like to, for this final question also to ask, what do you think about the diaspora? How do you think diaspora can help reaching out internationally or supporting nationally? What are your thoughts about this, how it has been done?
Maybe I can start now, because I would like to say something to Ileana, which really inspires me from the Colombian example, and maybe it can also give us some hope, is that you kind of were able to create some reference point, what you said, yeah, some reference points with which you can work then in the society, because I think Colombia is not the only society that is deeply divided, and we are, I mean, this is also true for Germany, but also for the other countries, and we have to work, and these reference points help maybe to create this work and dialogue. The role of the diaspora and the migrated people is very crucial, I would say, because they are the ones that are building the bridges between the societies. There's a lot of moving, going back and forward, you always have this imagination that people relocate to another place and then they are there. But in fact, there's so much movement going on across the borders. You cannot imagine this in times of war, but it's happening, you know. So I think people are being able, like going to other places, they are being able to sustain also social networks and aid and help and support and solidarity networks. So I think this is really, really crucial for the current situation in Ukraine.
Thank you.
And I think they have to be taken into account much more by the politicians and by the political level. Especially here in Germany, we have big debates how to integrate the refugees, not only from Ukraine, but also from many other countries, to take them seriously and to give them some more arenas to be able to be heard as experts and not as victims or refugees.
Thank you. Thank you. Sonja?
In war situations and in post-war situations, there are a lot of external support to women's initiatives in the countries which are in the war or after the war. What is the bad side of this process is that these foreign supporters have the ideas what to do and do not really think and ask the people in the spot how they see their problems and how they want to change the situation. I remember when the Stability Pact Task Force was established, we had a big meeting of international actors, governmental and others, and they said to us, okay, we allow you can have this gender task force, but you will work with trafficked women. And we said, no, we will not work with victims. We want to empower women to become actors. And this was the most difficult thing, in fact, to persuade international actors to give the women from the region to decide what are their real priorities. And this is what I would like to say to anybody who is working on the peace movement. Rely on the persons who are in the war situation, in the post-war situation. They know what is necessary. They know what is their priority. Maybe they do not know exactly how to do things. But as Inge said, bring them together and they will figure it out. Because the problem is that if they have the forum where they can speak to each other, if you just work as a catalyst from outside to make possible that they can talk to each other, I think then you are in a good path. You will have a success. If you try to force to the people to do what you think, what international people think that this is the best for you, this is the failure. I have seen this in many times in different countries.
Thank you. Thank you. And last, Iliana, if you still want to share something about the role of diasporas, and then we will start closing a little bit. If time is getting there, we're getting there.
Quiero hacer una reflexión sobre lo que ha representado.
I'd like to reflect on what the Venezuelan immigration in Colombia has amounted to. We didn't have the opportunity to receive migrants, it's rather quite the opposite. But the result of this Venezuelan migration not only had an effect on the economy of the country, but we also had the opportunity to share with other people who had originally always lived at peace and in better life conditions. And they had to come and establish relations with a country who at its birth has the conflict and inequality. So it has been very important to work with Venezuelan migrant women. And I agree with Sonja. can only be those who are sexual workers or trafficked women. But the support of the Colombian economy has been very important, but they also suffer through the migration through Panama, through the Caribbean Pacific coast. For the first time, Colombia is facing many migrants from different countries. For them, we are a stepping stone to get to the US, and it's generating right now reactions that we didn't have as a country. There was even any legislation regarding this. Always humanitarian aid provided by the church or International Red Cross and other NGOs that work in Colombia. They have allowed to grant a response to this humanitarian crisis. But I think it also provides something for the peace process in Colombia. They don't carry this pain that all Colombians carry with ourselves. The armed conflict, living through this armed conflict, not having in 6 years, not one day of living in peace. Thank you, Ileana.
A lot of national action plans have been signed up by the countries about how this really touching and getting into really bringing women on the peace process and strengthening these social movements, women's social movements, to really have more a say in peace, and how we can really visibilize the work of women and the role of women in society to maintain cohesion. When there is conflict, when there is war, women are there building up society, taking care of the children, taking care of the elders. So these roles, how we can visibilize this and create it, that they will not ask again, who are you representing, but there is a really recognition and visibilization of the women and the role that we have in society. I think really important. I find really interesting all the different strategies and bringing people together with the topics that that brings them together. There are small topics that brings them together, that are for their small interests, and not for the things that that divide people, but for the issue that brings people together. Are a good way of starting, creating intersectional movements, intersectional groups, getting out of the different boxes on not only academic, not only grassroots, not only one or the others, but creating intersectional approaches, bottom up, and also bringing the sandwich perspective that you were mentioning, Sonja, to push and to create pressure to others, changing narratives. I think there was a lot of interesting practices here mentioned, so I really want to thank you all. I don't know if each of you want to just say with one word something that you want to bring on the table before we close. The word of inspiration that you would want to share.
You know, I have a dream that women in Europe, from Russia and from Ukraine and from broader Europe, that we all stand up together and say, the war is not the solution. We should, every war sooner or later ends up with a dialogue, with the peace negotiations. Let's start them now. More we wait, the worse the situation is becoming. Everybody suffers, and there is no way out if there is no pressure from bottom up that we have to stop this war. And I'm really sad to see how little push for peace was expressed all over Europe.
Thank
I'm
you.
sad because of that.
Yes, that's true. Thank you, Sonja. Inga?
Yeah, I just want to say that I take away a lot of inspiration and a lot of hope, because I can see from the other examples that there's also other phases of war and conflict, and there's a post-war phase, and I really take this hope with me and inspiration that, you know, we keep continuing, and then there will come another phase, and we will do and be here for reaching this phase.
Liliana?
I feel very emotional about Inga's words. This is the hope that we have now, and we're going to really live through these agreements, and we're going to build a peaceful society. And to our friends, I want to say them, peace is unstoppable. Nothing can stop. This is for Inga. Thank you.
And thank you also for all your really rich experience. It was really great. We thought 1.5 hours, but we are running to 2 hours, but it was so rich that it was impossible to stop. So thank you very much. Thank you, White Plus, for creating this space for dialogue. And I hope we will continue creating these spaces and building up our movement across Europe and other countries. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, bye-bye. Gracias, Liliana.